Wow, that was really close. I almost became something me related. But at least I was able to pick up this mini fridge on the way back. But it's not just a mini fridge, it's a mini fridge with something inside. And if we were to examine the doors, we could see that inside it's not soda cans, not water, not even ice. It's a video game, but what game is that? Why, it's Resident Evil, because of course it is. So I'm certain that I will definitely play this game right away and not have to do another long ass review. I've been doing it for the past 3 years. I'm so glad we're finally past that. No, 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 no. We are not doing this again. I'm fine with like 1 year or 2 years and a little break in between, but 3 years? I can't be doing this forever, guys. The camera's still rolling, isn't it? Whatever. We'll do your little stupid ass tradition again. God damn it. Unfortunately, I'm gonna have to disappoint a lot of you because I don't have any Resident Evil rap battles to look at. At least not ones that I think would work for a video. Now, you all are probably asking, what am I supposed to look at as an alternative then? Well, considering the last 2 years where I've made videos about Resident Evil where I extensively talked about the game before I eventually got to the battle, I had the craziest idea ever. Instead of reviewing a battle that's related to the game, how about I just review the goddamn game? Whoa, novel concept, I know. Alright, Resident Evil Village, the 8th installment in the series, but originally it was meant to be part of the Revelations games before they decided to make it a mainline entry, kinda like how Code Veronica X was originally supposed to be Resident Evil 3. Apparently, they're still having that problem to this day. It takes place 3 years after the events of Resident Evil 7 when our protagonist, Ethan Winters, went out to find his wife Mia Winters, who went missing. In case you didn't play Resident Evil 7 before this, they do give you a recap upon first booting up the game in order to keep you up to speed. Though I suggest you actually play Resident Evil 7 in order to get a clear understanding of what actually happened during that time. After the two escape the Baker family, they move to Europe where Mia Winters gives birth to a daughter named Rosemary. All seems to be well for the Winterses, but Ethan is still shook up about the events of Louisiana, and Mia does not want to hear any more of it. Then suddenly the house gets shot up along with Mia, and we find out that the person who's behind the sudden attack is...
Chris? What the hell?
Sorry, Ethan.
No! What? Why?
This was one of the game's most advertised moments. Chris out of the blue going rogue and killing Ethan's wife right in front of him. Why? Is he possessed? Did Umbrella do something to him? Was it all according to Wesker's plan even though he clearly died in Resident Evil 5? Even more interesting is that in the first reveal of the game, there's a text in the beginning that says his story comes to an end. Many people believe this was hinting that this might be Chris Redfield's final game in the series. So is it all true? Well, we'll definitely get to that when we talk about the story. After Mia gets shot 5 times in the face, your daughter gets taken away and you're being transported to an undisclosed location. But something goes wrong and the truck that you were inside gets attacked and your daughter is nowhere to be seen. As you wander around in the forest, you eventually find yourself in the village with an ominous castle lurking in the distance. And that's the premise of your game. Find your daughter, figure out what happened to the once peaceful village, and most importantly, why Chris Redfield is acting the way he is. Let's get this thing out of the way. It's impossible to talk about Resident Evil Village without comparing it to Resident Evil 4, which came out 16 years ago, and it's easy to see why. A lot of elements in Village are lifted from Resident Evil 4 to the point where you can kind of consider this a direct sequel or spin-off to that game. You even have a segment where you have to survive the onslaught of enemies until an in-game timer runs out, and just before they can kill you, they retreat back to wherever they came from. The only difference here is Ethan doesn't make a snarky comment about bingo like Leon did. The castle of Domitresk bears a big resemblance to the Salazar castle in RE4, except you don't got a giant statue chasing you down. That's still one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. The Marble Lake along with the boss fight is near identical to the Del Lago boss. The only difference is in RE4, if you're thrown off your boat, you gotta be quick to get back on before you get swallowed by the beast. While in Village, if you're thrown offshore, well, you don't get that chance. The factory section is much like the military island, well with all the crazy experiments that go on inside the place, but you got no regenerators to deal with. I consider that a plus because regenerators are fucking terrifying. The dollhouse though is a different story. If you don't know about Resident Evil 4's development, there exists an old demo of the game known as Resident Evil 3.5. Looking at the beta trailer, it's nearly unrecognizable compared to the game we got back in 2005. This is what a Resident Evil game would have been like if it was heavily inspired by Silent Hill. The most factor to that was the introduction of supernatural horror like ghostly apparitions and dolls coming to life. Of course, given how much the series relies on bioweapons as the sole reason why the zombie outbreak happened in the first place, it's pretty obvious why this version of the game was scrapped. But it would not go completely to waste, and I'm about to shock some of you Devil May Cry fans out there, because this demo is what spawned the creation of the first Devil May Cry game. I know, I'm shocked as well. Now, remember when I said about the dolls coming to life? Well, it's exactly how it is in Resident Evil Village. So, while that boss fight was lifted from an existing beta in the series, you can argue it was Capcom wanting to do something with the idea after having it lay dormant for so long. The item management system is just like how it was in RE4, where you have to find ways to make space for your inventory by moving your items around. Key items are moved to a category so they don't take up space. This goes the same for treasure items. The only difference is that unlike RE4, where you gotta combine herbs to make a single object to avoid an overfilled inventory, Resident Evil Village places any herbs and chem fluids you find into the new crafting menu. This is where you can make first aid meds, bullets for your pistol, shotgun or sniper rifle rounds, grenade rounds, pipe bombs, and mines. And of course, there's the merchant. But it's not that merchant. Say hello to the Duke. There's not really much to say about him, but it's kind of interesting that they made him play a bit of a role in the story, whereas the merchant in Resident Evil 4 kind of existed outside of it. You can sell any treasure items or weapons you have in your disposal, you can upgrade your weapons to the highest tier, and you can purchase attachments, expand your case, and get extra bullets in case you're short on them. There's the Duke's recipes where you can find animals across certain areas in the map that you can kill and take meat from them. By giving the Duke a specific amount of the ingredients, he'll cook you up a nice meal that will either increase your health or speed. By the way, don't make my mistake and sell the meat to him, because it will not count towards making a recipe. Also in Village, you can find areas that have a shining item on the ceiling or walls, and upon shooting that said shining object, you can get something valuable to sell to the Duke. But let me tell you, these things are a bitch to find. In RE4, you can easily spot the glint of an item from a very far distance. But in Village, I'm nearly blind because the shine does not stick out that much. So I had to shoot all over the place with a grenade launcher and then look at the floor to see if I got anything. It wouldn't be that hard if everything surrounding the area wasn't the color white. You know, a color a shining light can easily blend into. Much like Resident Evil 4, enemies do drop currency you can use to buy these items, now known as lei, but they also drop special treasure items that are very valuable if you manage to kill one of the higher tier enemies throughout the village, or the bosses, which are always guaranteed a high price. I gotta say though, I kind of wonder why they brought back the merchant along with this Resident Evil 4 inventory system. It kind of undervalues the survival horror aspect when you can just buy ammo and sorts of other items to help you throughout the game. And no joke, during my entire first playthrough of the game, I did not once have to worry about my inventory overflowing due to the amount of stuff I had inside. Of course, that could be because I made my inventory case larger, but that kind of proves my point further. When I can easily make more room for my weapons by simply buying the stuff at a very generous price, might I add, it doesn't really have me worry that much when I eventually start to run out of ammo later on. Plus, why buy ammo when I could just find salvage to make them, or vice versa? Sure, I'm gonna run out of those eventually, but still. On the surface, this may seem like a complete rehash of the 4th game, but there is some stuff that Village does differently. RE4 was a very linear game, often having you go from point A to B, whereas Village allows the sandbox exploration world the series is known for. Wells that need a key item in order to access, or gates that were locked off at the start can be accessible so you can either receive valuable items, ammo, or in some cases, attachments for your weapons. It's also important to know that once you kill a boss in their intended locations, i.e. Lady Dimitrescu in her castle, or Donna in her dollhouse, that place will be locked off until you start a new game. So make sure you checked every single spot before you get to the boss fights. Hey, at least there's this. They already have all the assets ready when they eventually make the Resident Evil 4 remake, which is due to release sometime in 2023. Oh, thank God. That means I can finally have a 1-year break from doing these kinds of videos again. Oh, God damn it. Speaking of the boss fights, I might as well talk about what is probably the most disappointing thing about this game. And that thing is, it's not all that scary. RE7's horror got the most reactions out of me compared to the other games I played, as I personally think first-person horror games are more terrifying than in third person. But in Village, nothing really had me nervous in my seat and wondering what's gonna pop up. The environment is pretty bright, so it's easier to spawn an enemy from a distance. I got scared by a pig of all things, but that's one of the cheaper jump scares. None of the bosses had those nerve-wracking moments where you're like, oh god, where did it go? Or do I have enough ammo to stop it? Hardly did I ever find a moment where I felt legitimately scared of either the situation I'm in or the enemies I'm put up against. And then I went to the dollhouse. Yeah, you all knew this was coming. Resident Evil Village does have one horror segment that is done very well, and that's when you get to the House of Beneviento. That's the little creepy ass doll you see when you're captured by the family. Now I know what you're all thinking. Come on, a creepy doll? That's the easiest way to get a scare out of the player. And it kind of is here, but believe it or not, there is something far more terrifying than a sentient doll in the game. During a puzzle segment, you lose all of your weapons and have to go down a well and find a key to fix the elevator to get back to the house. While this is going on, the lights go out completely and you start to hear a baby's cry. As you're walking back to the puzzle room, you notice what appears to be a bloody rope of some sorts on the ground that leads to the hallway. You go inside to see where it leads you to, and then you find this. Jesus fucking Christ. I have never felt this much nope in my entire life until now when my eyes laid on that. This giant deformed baby appearing out of complete darkness, crawling towards you slowly while it laughs and calls for you in its distorted voice, all in the while you are stuck in this tightly spaced area with no weapons to defend yourself, makes this one of the most terrifying enemies I have ever encountered in the entire series. It's not a long segment, mind you, but damn does it do its job in scaring the absolute shit out of you. And while the encounter itself is very easy to maneuver around due to how the enemy is coded, what's funny is that no matter how many times I played this segment, I was still panicking simply because that thing was always on my tail, and that if I mess up even once, I'm dead. That is true horror right there. And I believe this is something Capcom needs to do more often with this series going forward. Can you imagine a Resident Evil game where you have this one disgusting looking unkillable enemy stalking you in every single area you go to throughout the entire game, and while you're hearing its voice in the distance but don't know where it will appear? No way to kill it, no way to slow it down, no way to give it a slip, and no way to survive it if it catches up to you. That would be the tits. Once we finally escape that pit of hell, and being given more nightmares afterwards, we're now taken to the second most terrifying moment in the game. When you get back to the house, you find out it's surrounded with dolls, and Angie pops up in front of you and says you gotta play a game of hide and seek. Oh, and also there's a time limit, so you gotta do it quickly or the dolls will kill you. The house is pretty small, and Angie is not hard to spot out of all the other dolls, but just the fact that you're on a time limit that is not displayed on your screen, and all the dolls begin to freak out if you take too long to find her, is enough to make anyone panic. But after finding her 3 times, you're pretty much done with Angie's section. So, while Resident Evil Village disappoints with most of its horror segments, the House of Beneviento easily makes up for it as one of the best horror moments in the entire series. Well, since we already talked about Donna and Angie's boss fight so much, we might as well talk about the other bosses in this game. And who else to start with than the big mommy milker herself, Lady Dimitrescu. I'm not gonna get into the whole hype around her character as it's irrelevant to the review, but I am going to discuss how this whole marketing campaign around her kind of hurt the game in some way. All this gushing about a big titty vampire lady and her 3 daughters that you must fight inside her castle, yeah, that's all in the first section of the game. Once you deal with her daughters, you then fight Lady Dimitrescu in her mutated form, cause let's all be real here, she was gonna mutate into a disgusting monster at some point. It's Resident Evil tradition. And once you defeat her mutated form, then that's it. You're done with Lady D and her daughters. Really, I blame this all on the self-hyping people had with her. We all took a small look at that woman. We all thought, holy shit, big tall girl. Capcom saw the reactions to that, so they decided to market her as much as possible, which led people to believing she had a much more prevalent role in the story. But she doesn't. Personally, I think they should have saved her for later instead of throwing her out after the first fight with her in the castle. It definitely would have given her more time to fully flesh out what kind of people these 4 were and not disappoint people with the promises of her being a major villain. The second boss, well, actually it's the third one, is Maru, or as I like to call him, Sad Fish Boy, because god damn is he depressing to watch.
Wait, please. If you take it, then the others will laugh at me. But if I do better than them...
Every line has such a sad tone to it, and I feel so bad for him. His backstory is also the saddest too. He's basically that unloved child that the parents never wanted, always desperate to get his mother's approval before eventually leads him to his ultimate demise. Okay, that was a lot more sappy here than it was in the game, But still, reading just about any one of these bosses' stories and the documents you find throughout the game shows you that they're not completely devoid of some type of humanity. Hearing how Lady Dimitrescu takes the news about all her daughters being dead, how Donna isolated herself because of her noticeable scar around her face, not speaking to anyone except for this one doll she was given to her father before he died, and Maru being the forgotten and unloved child, definitely gives these otherwise bad people a lot of depth that I personally haven't seen much in these games. But since they're bioweapons, of course they're gonna eventually kill you, and you'll have to stop them no matter what. I hope in some future DLCs we can see more of these people's backstories and see where exactly they came from and what turned them into these monsters in the first place, much like the Baker family in Resident Evil 7. But the man who really steals the show is Carl Heisenberg, the second biggest Chad in the whole game. Heisenberg has the most screen time out of the rest, and unlike the rest of the family who are very much on the side of Mother Miranda, who we'll get to later, Heisenberg is the only one who detests her actions, feeling like he was robbed from his life to fill in the deeds of Mother Miranda, who is desperately searching for the right specimen to create the child that she lost a long time ago. Heisenberg plans to actually stop her before the mentioned ceremony could ever take place. You feel like his goals are justified, and while you may not trust him entirely because he's still a bioweapon, you can't see him as a sort of unlikely ally Ethan can be with temporarily before the two go their separate ways. But then he fucks it all up by telling Ethan in order to stop Mother Miranda, he will have to use Ethan's daughter's power to get the fighting chance. And you know Ethan's not going to take that lightly. So when you deny him, he takes it about as well as one may expect.
Your funeral.
I find it hilarious that despite the massive marketing of Lady Dimitrescu's character, Heisenberg stood out the most purely for his looks and personality. Just goes to show you that boobs and ass do not equal good. Sometimes. Resident Evil Village has 4 difficulty settings. Casual, which is for the people who are looking for an easy experience, or suck that hard at the game. Standard for the regular experience. Hardcore for the veteran players looking for a challenge. And a new 4th difficulty called Village of Shadows, which is basically Ethan Must Die Part 2. I actually recommend playing hardcore instead of standards because honestly this game is not that hard. Like I said, that problem mostly comes from the inventory system where you can store a lot more items inside and put key and treasure items in a specific category. When I can easily overpower myself with multiple weapons of different classes and get a generous amount of ammo for buying them in a store or crafting them, well, that challenge pretty much disappears for me. All that's left is the type of enemies they throw at you to counteract these advantages. And, to be fair, they actually do have quite the variety here. Way more than that of Resident Evil 7, which only composed of molds, molds with blades, crawler molds, blob molds, and that's really it. Resident Evil Village this time has Lycans, who either carry blades for close quarter attacks or shoot firebows from unreachable spots, dungeon zombies that can grab onto you or slash you with their sickles, winged zombies that require you to use a sniper to pick them off, these fully developed werewolves you can find across the village, and in Heisenberg's factory, you got these motherfuckers that look like they came straight out of COD Zombies. There's even a monster in a document called the Panzer Soldat. Is that supposed to be a reference? In fact, most of these bosses look like they came from different franchises. Lady Dimitrescu looked like she came from the Elder Scrolls, Donna and Angie look like they belong in the Fatal Frame games, this abomination clearly was inspired by PT, Moru and Mother Miranda look like Dark Souls bosses, and Heisenberg, well, he looks like something 2B would fight in the next Nier game. Speaking of bosses, they also vary in the ways you gotta kill them. Lady Dimitrescu requires you to use a sniper when she gets far away. Maru needs you to get up close to attack him inside the mouth, but also avoid his vomit acid rain, and Heisenberg lets you use a freaking artillery machine gun tank. Now this is fighting fire with fire. And of course, for the final boss, you must shoot her with everything you got. Another Resident Evil tradition here, but this time they ended differently. Unlike other games where you're given a powerful weapon from someone to use for the boss at the last minute, here all you do is simply shoot her with your regular guns. Well, now that tradition is broken. So yeah, if you're looking for a challenging experience in this game, I recommend playing on either Hardcore or the Village of Shadows. You might rage at them easily, but to me, that's the beauty of survival horror games. They do not go easy on you. Before we get to the last two segments, I want to take a break for a little minute to be the biggest nitpicker ever. That's right, it's time for highlights. This is the section where I talk about some small moments in the game or about it that don't have much to do with the overall experience, but are worth bringing up. Number 1. Capcom apparently thought to themselves, hey, Ethan's hands didn't get enough abuse in the previous game, so let's do more damage to them here. He gets part of his hand chewed off, he gets hooks stabbed through his palms and has to slide his hands off them vertically, and Lady Domitrez slashes his right hand off. God, leave Ethan's hands alone for Christ's sake. Number 2, so we all know Chris is the only returning protagonist so far, but did you know that they were gonna have someone else return? If you own a deluxe version of the game, you can find art about how Ada Wong was planned to appear in Village and would meet with Ethan while dressed up in black gear. However, this was cut due to conflicting scenarios. That, and adding her into the game would have drawn even more comparisons to RE4 probably. Who knows if they're gonna save her for future DLC. Number 3, if you search around Duke's shop for a certain amount of time, he will say this.
What are you buying? Just something an old friend of mine used to say.
Wow, so in the world of Resident Evil, the Duke and the merchant were friends at one point. That's pretty lit. Side note, the Duke is apparently invincible to any and all grenades. Number 4. Okay, he is the best villain in the entire series. Number 5. Oh hey, you can look at character models in the menu. Maybe we can finally see Ethan's face. I should have known. Number 6. I really hate the map design for the village. Like, look at this horse shit. Here's a section of the map where it looks like I could go down a pathway. Looks to be all clear, doesn't it? But when I actually get to the spot, it's blocked off. Are you shitting me, game? And there are several places that have the same dumb design choice. If it's not a path I can go down to, don't make the map look like a path I can go down to. Number 7. Why is there a photo mode in this game where you can't see your character? More importantly, why does every game feel the need to have a photo mode at all? Oh wow, I'm glad the developers took the time to make this mode as accessible as possible for the players. Look how revolutionary this is! Number 8. Nice throw, Ethan, you fucking idiot. What is up with this game and everyone throwing grenades without any momentum whatsoever? And lastly, if you get a double S rank on all Mercenaries maps, you get a very special weapon. You don't get an infinite ammo gun, you don't get a death machine, you don't get a rocket launcher. No, instead, you get a freaking lightsaber! No, this is not a mod, this is really in the game. That is awesome. Okay, highlights over. Let's move on. Finally, let's get into the story of Resident Evil Village and see if our speculations were correct when that first trailer dropped. So we already know the basics. Mia gets shot and killed by a very uncharacteristic Chris Redfield. Ethan and his daughter are dragged away. Ethan gets stranded in the forest and finds himself in the village. Finds out Rose is somewhere in the village, so he goes on a hunt to save her. Later, it's found that Mother Miranda was the one who abducted Rosemary after the vehicle crashed that contained both her and Ethan Winters. Mother Miranda has spent multiple decades to get back her child Eva, who died 100 years ago from the Spanish flu, and her source of bringing back her daughter is called the Megamist. If she merges Rose with the Megamist, then her child will officially be reborn. As for everyone in the village, those were part of her experiments that failed to bring her child back from the dead, hence the existence of the villagers, Lycans, Lady Domitrescu, Donna, Maru, and Heisenberg. But apparently there was one more creation she made by a certain organization who reached out to her some time ago. And that other creation is Evelyn. You heard that right. The main villain from Resident Evil 7 was made by Mother Miranda. But this is not the only big discovery we find in the game. And here is where the Resident Evil history kinda gets flipped on its head. During her experiments in the village around a few decades ago, a medical student decides to observe these rather groundbreaking discoveries that Miranda stumbled upon, and after staying there for quite some time, it has inspired him to find and create similar experiments but in form of a virus, which ultimately led to him forming a company called Umbrella. But that's not all. You know who the person's name is that sent Miranda this letter? Oswald E. Spencer. The entirety of the Resident Evil series was made possible because of Mother Miranda. I don't know how I should feel about this. On one hand, this makes the sequel play a huge role in the games, as it's basically the birthplace of everything that transpired after Spencer visited the village, where he got the idea of controlling organisms and the virus, and how he thought of the name for the Umbrella Corporation because of the symbols. But on the other hand, this raises major concerns with the lore. The Megamist was around for supposedly centuries, and Mother Miranda got a hold of them and experimented on them for decades. But they're just now being discovered years after the Spencer Mansion incident? And does this mean there are other non-worldly organisms around the world that existed way before the 1900s? No wonder this game was meant to be revelations free. This is a gigantic revelation to the entire series as we know it. But now we must ask the question, why is Mother Miranda going through all this trouble to use Ethan's baby for her experiment? Why her specifically? Well, it seems to us that Rosemary is not actually a normal baby as we thought. She holds something very special. You might be wondering what those yellow flasks are that each lord, that being the bosses you fight, have in their possession. Well, it's not their piss, I'll tell you that. It's actually a container that, oh boy, carries the dismembered body parts of Rosemary. Damn, Capcom, you sure didn't hold back on being absolutely ruthless. However, the Duke tells Ethan that there is a way to save her, which sounds comical considering what happened to her body, but that's where we find out about Rose's true powers. When taken by Mother Miranda, she crystallized Rose's body and broke off each part of a limb for all 4 wards to carry just before the ceremony. Wow, that somehow managed to sound worse than cutting the child in pieces. Once the ceremony is completed, Rose will be reborn as Miranda's daughter, and that means hell for the entire world, I guess. When all flasks are eventually combined, Rosemary does indeed become fully intact once again, because she possesses the power of the mold. Now that seems crazy enough. But what's even crazier is that Rose was a mold before Mother Miranda even got a hold of her. How? She has not made contact with any person infected with the mold, and Mia got cured from it a long time ago before she and Ethan eventually made the sex to create her. So who gave her this power? Well, that's when we make a very dark discovery about our good old friend Ethan Winters. After he kills Heisenberg, he meets up with Mother Miranda. The two have a talk about Miranda's child. Ethan butts in and tells her no, you can't take her. So she rips Ethan's heart out and kills him. Whoa, we're not even done with the game yet and he's already dead? Well, actually no. After his heart gets ripped out, Ethan finds himself in the cold snow, nearly freezing to death, and whoa, how'd he get his fingers back? Upon crawling his way in the snow, we face Evelyn once again, and this is where we find out what really happened to him back at the Baker Mansion 3 years ago. It turns out, Ethan has been dead this whole time. The moment Jack Baker stomped on his head was the day Ethan died, and all this time, he's been a mold with all his humanity intact until he meets the day where his body will eventually break apart. That explains why he can easily reattach his limbs with first aid meds. That's all because of the mold. And this is also why, even though his heart is ripped right out of his chest, he comes back to life to finish Miranda's plan once and for all. He may have lost his heart, but he has not lost the one goal he had for this entire game: to save his daughter. Huh, I feel like we're forgetting someone.
Chris?
Oh shit, Chris! We completely forgot about his role in the game. So, is it all true? Has Chris fallen to the dark side? Did he really kill Mia? Has Umbrella messed with his mind? Was it all done by the BSAA? Well, no. As Chris tells us after punching us several times, the person he killed in your house was not Mia. It was Mother Miranda in disguise. The plan went as follows. Sometime during Rose's story time, Miranda abducted Mia and took her to the village to experiment on her, while Miranda planned to be around Rose in the house, hoping to control her right away. This explains Mia's very odd behavior whenever the Louisiana incident is brought up, because Miranda might not know anything about it, so if she struggled to answer Ethan's questions about it, her cover would have been blown. Chris and his team were tipped off about Miranda's infiltration in the Winters' houses, so they acted fast and shot up the place to neutralize Miranda. As for why Chris took Ethan and Rose away, he was led to believe Miranda probably already infected them and didn't want to risk the possibility of Ethan attacking them when their guard is down. Despite shooting Miranda multiple times in the head, she acted quickly and disguised herself as a corpse that they took in with Ethan and Rose inside a transport vehicle that she eventually destroys later on and takes Rose away. Come on, Chris, you know after 30 years of experience that infected people do not stay dead after the first phase. Even though Chris realized Ethan wasn't infected, he still did not want him to get involved, as he believes there should not be more civilian casualties, and that it is not his business to interfere with his men, which is why he didn't discuss the plan beforehand. Yeah, this part of the story isn't really well thought out. I know it's realistic that Chris and his squad would get careless in a mission every now and then, but it feels so contrived when it comes to Chris not telling Ethan about what was going on and what their plan was to stop Miranda. It probably would have been better had he been under the control of Miranda's powers instead of acting recklessly on his own free will. But I guess they didn't want Chris to be infected in any sort of way for the series. But hey, we can all at least sigh in relief that he is not a villain, nor does he turn into a werewolf. You think I'm joking about that last one? I'm not. That's really what people thought before this game came out, that he was gonna turn into a werewolf. I don't get it either. After going through hell and back, we finally kill Mother Miranda and save Rosemary. All's well that ends well, right? Well, no. After the Mega Mice starts to collapse, Ethan's body starts to fall apart. Despite Chris's many efforts in trying to get him to see Mia again, Ethan lets Chris take Rosemary away and asks him to watch out for her. He then steals the detonator that Chris planted onto the Mega Mice, and he retreats back to the village. With one final hesitation as the Mega Mice gets closer and everything around him starts to blur, he pushes the button and the entire village is blown up along with him. So yeah, for the first time ever in the series, they killed off a main protagonist. Now, yes, there was Jake in Resident Evil 6, but he was merely a one-off character, while Ethan appeared in this and Resident Evil 7, making him a surviving protagonist along with Leon, Chris, and Jill. After Chris brings Rosemary back to Mia and tells her the bad news, one of his men find out that the BSAA, who were looking into the village as well, were sending bioweapons instead of actual soldiers. So they plan to infiltrate the BSAA Europe HQ to figure out why they are doing such a thing. What's that? Plans for future DLC? I believe so. But wow, a Resident Evil title that doesn't end on a happy note while riding to the sunrise? How many traditions are you planning to break, Capcom? So that's the end of Resident Evil Village, but there's still more at the end. Sometime after the events of Village, we see a woman reading the same book that Mia was reading to Rose. What? And she's wearing Ethan's coat? Oh my, could that be? Yep, this is Rosemary all grown up, and is currently visiting the grave of her late father. Now, this post-credits scene raises so many questions. One, Rosemary has to be in her teens around this time. Does that mean we're time skipping to 15 years after the events of Resident Evil Village? Oh, that's sad. All the Resident Evil casts are gonna be really old. I don't want to see that. Two, what kind of job do these people want for her, and will that ever be established in either DLC or in the 9th game? 3, who is this person all the way back there as the shot lingers onto the car? I hear that some people actually went into the game files to move the camera around as it's all an in-game cutscene, and they found out that the person walking to the car is Ethan? Apparently, this means Ethan never died when the village exploded. I call bullshit. We clearly saw that man calcify after killing Miranda, and after all this time, he still has the bloody bandage around his hand? Yeah, I think this is a case of them reusing assets and not as a hint that Ethan might still be alive for future games. I don't buy that. And lastly, to go back to Rosemary being all grown up, what does this mean for the Resident Evil series now with this large time skip? There are many theories to assume what may actually happen. The first being that Rosemary is pretty much a mold, so this means that she has the ability to age quicker like Evelyn, so this 15-year time skip might really just be a couple of months, which is somewhat likely. The second is that this is merely a non-canon jump into the future, and they won't actually follow up with this part of the story until I guess Capcom decides to finish off the franchise, which is unlikely. The third one being, I have no fucking idea. We're already trying to figure out what Chris's plans are and if that will play a part in RE9 or as future DLC. And if Resident Evil 9 does indeed jump 15 years later, then Chris's plan would have been completely void by that point. And to top it all off, we still haven't seen the other Resident Evil cast yet. And I doubt Capcom would just want to throw them all away in favor of Chris Redfield taking the spotlight all the time. I have mentioned before that Ada Wong was originally going to be in the game before they cut her out, but there is a good chance she might be saved as DLC for this game. There's so many possibilities for this game that we cannot figure out a single likely scenario for them. All we can really do is wait and see what happens. And you know what? I'm alright with waiting and seeing instead of waiting and assuming. But I still want that Chris DLC soon. Alright, it's about time we wrap this video up, so here we go. Resident Evil Village, while it has some setbacks in terms of horror and difficulty, is still a fun and engaging title for old fans and new fans to enjoy. Those who are fans of Resident Evil 4 will enjoy its return to the inventory system along with catching callbacks to the old title while still feeling like its old game.
and those who are fans of Resident Evil 7 will enjoy its return to the first-person perspective, along with finally closing the chapter of Ethan's story that people were invested in back in 2017. However, some fans of both sides might find disappointment in its lack of horror segments, some beats in the story not nearly landing as well as they thought, and being an otherwise easy title compared to the previous games. But despite all that, there is a lot to enjoy, whether it's unlocking all the figures, looking at the concept art, watching the production of the game and movies, playing on the hardest difficulties, or playing the bonus Mercenaries mode, which I didn't have much to say except, wow, it's about time they brought this mode back. I highly recommend this title to people who are looking for a return to the RE4 roots after nearly 16 years, and for those who are looking to be invested into the story that Resident Evil 7 built up 4 years ago. It's also a good break from all the remakes we got, and we can finally get something new in the series, until Remake 4 comes out eventually. Oh well, what can you do? So, to finally bring this video to an end, my overall rating for Resident Evil Village is, funny enough, an 8 out of 10.
Well, that was my review of Resident Evil Village. I hope you all enjoyed it, and... oh my god! Could that be? Wait. Oh my god. Resident Evil 4. You're fine after all this time. Ugh. Oh no. My body is calcifying. I'm sorry. Watch out for him. Teach him to be strong. And most importantly, don't fuck him up. Goodbye, Resident Evil 4. You want explosions? I'll give you explosions. He's gone! I tried. He stayed so we could be saved. Capcom, come take a look at this. What is it? It's the B-Team's Resident Evil 3 remake from 2020. They didn't stay faithful to the original. They cut out all the content. What the hell were they thinking? Who's remaking the fourth? The B-Team, Capcom. Cancel it. What? Tell them they've been dropped from the project. We're getting the A-Team, the same people who remade the second game, and push it back to 2023. On it, sir. Someone's gotta do this remake justice. That was fun, wasn't it? But no, seriously, I'm not doing this again. This is absolutely ridiculous. So, yeah, this is the last time I'm going to be doing this kind of tradition, as everybody calls it. Next time, we'll go back to our regular rap battle reviews. It'll take me a while, though, to figure out which one's going to work, and yeah, if you can't tell, I'm fucking exhausted because those outside portions, yeah, just, I was cooking to death there, so I don't know how to end this. Just show the question of the day thing stuff. Yeah, there you go. Alright, I'll see you guys later. I'm taking a fucking nap.